China will never allow any country, including the United States, to throw the rule of free trade out of the window and to be presumptuous enough to say, this is the way I do. I hold a gun at your hand, cry uncle, and kneel in front of me. No, China will never do that. Whether other countries will decide to do that, that's their choice. But China will never do that.
Back here in South Texas, this year's cotton crop is projected to be one of the best ever. Despite the good news, one group of farmers warns it may be hard to move because of the China-U.S. tariff war. The Cotton Growers Warehouse Association had its yearly meeting this weekend at the Omni Hotel. The hottest topic had to do with all of the cotton that is going to be harvested later this summer. 3/4 of the cotton grown in the U.S. is exported to other countries. The Cotton Growers Group represents roughly 40% of warehouses in the country and say there is a true financial worry.
Plans to change, and the short answer is that I expect us to get this worked out. We got so much money invested into any particular part of this infrastructure that is going to be financially devastating to just say I quit growing cotton. Because if I quit growing cotton, my neighbor's probably going to quit growing cotton, so who wants to buy my cotton picker?
News has learned the Trump administration could announce a multi-billion-dollar financial relief package this week for farmers being hurt by the president's trade war with China.
Some of that tariff money that we made, we're going to give it to.
Something unbelievable just happened in the global trade world, something so shocking, so unexpected, that it has sent a wave of panic straight through America's agricultural heartland. For years, the United States believed it had an unshakable grip on one of its most profitable export markets, cotton. But overnight, yes, overnight the script changed. A massive shift occurred. A billion-dollar door slammed shut in Washington's face. And another door swung wide open for Africa. The world wasn't prepared. Investors weren't prepared. Even policymakers are still scrambling to understand how everything flipped so fast. One day, American cotton enjoyed its steady dominance. The next day, the world's second-largest economy, China, suddenly turned away from it, rejecting it, cutting ties, redirecting its demand. And that single move has created one of the biggest trade earthquakes of the decade. The shockwave didn't end in the U.S., it echoed across the world, and the place where it hit the hardest, where it changed the most, was Africa. For the first time in modern trade history, African cotton producers have found themselves in a position the world never expected, standing at the center of a global supply chain that used to bypass them, taking control of a market that previously belonged to American giants, becoming not just an alternative but the new preferred source. How did this happen? Why now? And what exactly does China's rejection of U.S. cotton mean for Africa's future? Let's break it down. For decades, American cotton was king. It dominated the textile supply chains, feeding China's massive factories. It powered entire states, Texas, Georgia, Mississippi, turning their harvests into billions of dollars in revenue. But beneath the surface, tensions were building. Questions about cost, questions about quality, questions about politics, and one question that grew louder every year. Why continue relying on expensive American cotton when Africa is producing the same high-grade fiber at a fraction of the cost? China saw the numbers, China analyzed the trends, and China made a move that nobody thought it would make so boldly. They walked away. Suddenly, the U.S. found itself staring at a devastating reality, losing its biggest cotton customer, losing billions in export revenue, losing the strategic influence that comes with controlling a major global commodity. But while America was losing, Africa was winning. Across the continent, from Benin to Burkina Faso, from Mali to Tanzania, cotton-producing nations woke up to a new reality. Phone calls started coming in, buyers started negotiating, contracts started shifting. The world's largest textile machine had turned toward them, looking for stable partnerships, reliable supply, and better long-term deals. And the numbers don't lie. Africa already produces over 1.5 million tons of cotton annually. It is home to some of the highest quality fiber in the world. And unlike many Western industries, African cotton is grown naturally, often with minimal chemical use, a major selling point for global textile brands trying to clean up their supply chains. China didn't just see a supplier. China saw an opportunity, a strategic realignment, and that realignment has triggered what analysts are calling the most dramatic commodity shift of the decade. Because this is not just about cotton, this is about power, this is about leverage, this is about who gets to shape the future of the global textile market. And for the first time in a long time, Africa is holding the pen. From the international perspective, this shift is enormous. The United States now faces a billion-dollar hole in its export book, one it cannot easily fill. farmers are panicking. Politicians are scrambling, trade analysts are calling emergency meetings. For a sector that relies so heavily on Chinese demand, losing access means losing stability, and losing stability means losing money, lots of it. But while American politicians argue and farmers protest, African producers are entering a new era. Contracts are expanding, demand is rising, prices are strengthening. And with China now showing a long-term interest in African cotton, governments across the continent are beginning to accelerate investment, new ginneries, new railway lines, better storage facilities, improved processing centers. Because for the first time ever, Africa isn't just exporting raw cotton, it's preparing to dominate the entire value chain. This is where things get even bigger. If Africa not only grows cotton but also processes it and eventually manufactures the textiles, it could become a global clothing powerhouse, a new center of textile production, a competitor to India, Pakistan, and even China itself. And that's exactly why the world is paying attention. This is not a simple trade shift, this is a geopolitical reshuffling. China didn't just reject American cotton. China redirected billions of dollars toward African farmers. China elevated Africa's role in the global supply chain. China pushed the US out of a market it believed it owned. And now, Africa stands on a brand new foundation, stronger, more influential, and more economically valuable than ever before. But here's the big question. Is this shift permanent? Many experts believe it is. China is building long-term partnerships, multi-year deals, investment-backed agreements, and cooperative programs to strengthen African production. This isn't a temporary reaction, it's a strategic move, a move that could reshape global cotton flows for the next decade, a move that proves Africa is no longer the background of global trade, it is becoming a central player. A move that shows the world that African commodities are no longer dependent. They are in demand, and that is why this story is so explosive. Because in one sudden decision, the world's largest cotton buyer walked away from America and turned toward Africa, changing the future of global agriculture in a single stroke, a shift worth billions, a shift no one saw coming. A shift that is rewriting the rules of global trade. This isn't just a cotton story, it's an economic revolution, it's a political message, it's a new chapter for Africa, and the world has no choice but to pay attention. While the headlines scream about China rejecting American cotton, the real story, the story that truly matters, is buried deep beneath the surface, because this shift didn't happen suddenly, it didn't happen emotionally, and it definitely didn't happen by accident. This was strategic, this was calculated, this was planned. And the first signs appeared years ago, long before anyone realized what was coming. China has been quietly studying Africa's cotton potential for over a decade. But instead of announcing its plans loudly, it took its time. It watched global trends, it analyzed farm output, it monitored quality. And the moment American cotton prices surged, the moment political tensions rose, the moment US officials began threatening tariffs and sanctions, that's when the Chinese government made the call, a call that would change everything. Behind closed doors, meetings began between Chinese textile giants and African ministers. Delegations flew into Benin, Burkina Faso, Tanzania, Zambia, touring fields, inspecting ginneries, evaluating supply chains. What looked like diplomatic niceties at the time was actually the early stage of a colossal economic realignment. And then, one by one, the agreements started forming, not short-term purchases, not one-season deals, but multi-year supply contracts, billions of dollars worth. Contracts designed to guarantee African farmers stable demand for years to come. Meanwhile, in the United States, farmers had no idea anything was changing. They were told China was simply adjusting imports. They were reassured it was temporary. They were promised the market would normalize, but it never did. Because by the time Washington realized what was happening, China had already rewired the cotton supply chain. Farmers in the US watched helplessly as shipments slowed, prices dipped, demand evaporated. It wasn't until major industry associations started raising alarms that the truth finally came out. China had pivoted, America had lost the world's biggest buyer, and Africa had stepped into the spotlight. But this is where the story takes its most interesting turn. African producers were ready, thanks to rising quality standards, improved processing plants, and government-backed agricultural programs. African cotton was not only cheaper, it was competitive, in some cases, even superior. China saw this, China understood this, and China placed its bets accordingly. But here's the part nobody is talking about. This move wasn't just economic, it was geopolitical. By shifting its cotton supply to Africa, China strengthened its influence across key regions. It created new partnerships, it deepened alliances, It opened the door for its industries, its loans, its technology, and its political leverage. Every bale of cotton China buys is more than fiber. It's a relationship, its influence, its positioning, and while the U.S. is losing influence in these regions, China is gaining it faster than anyone expected. The shift has already transformed rural economies across West and East Africa. Farmers who once struggled with unstable markets are now seeing consistent demand. Governments that used to beg for trade access are now negotiating from a position of strength. Investors that ignored African agriculture for decades are suddenly showing interest. In other words, Africa isn't begging for a seat at the table anymore. Africa is the table, and the world's biggest players now have no choice but to sit with it. But of course, when one global power rises in a region, another one tends to push back, and this is where the story escalates as American farmers continue to lose billions. As U.S. trade officials search desperately for new markets, as Washington realizes just how much influence it has lost, pressure begins to build, rumors of new trade policies, talk of retaliatory tariffs, whispers of agricultural subsidies, and speculation about political moves designed to counter China in Africa, because losing cotton isn't just losing money, it's losing leverage, it's losing power, it's losing dominance, something America is not used to and definitely not prepared for. Meanwhile, African nations find themselves at a crossroads. Do they deepen their partnership with China? Do they balance between East and West? Or do they leverage both sides to strengthen local industries? For the first time, Africa has the advantage. For the first time, Africa is setting the terms. And that is what makes this shift so historic. Because behind every contract, every shipment, every new cotton gin, there is a bigger question. Is this the beginning of Africa's rise as a global manufacturing powerhouse? Or is it the first step in a new global power struggle playing out through African soils? Either way, the world is about to discover that cotton, simple, soft, ordinary cotton, is now at the center of a geopolitical showdown, and Africa holds the winning card.